The words hit me like a brick against glass, sudden and sharp enough to leave invisible cracks inside my chest. It was a quiet autumn evening in a small neighborhood outside Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The kind of evening where the sky turns amber and the air smells faintly of fallen leaves. I had just stepped out onto my porch, holding a paper bag filled with groceries for the woman I believed I loved. My neighbor leaned against the wooden fence separating our yards, arms folded, eyes soft but serious. She looked at me with the kind of honesty people rarely dare to show, and then she said something that would change everything. She said that the woman I was trying so hard to love didn't love me back. For a moment, the world felt strangely silent. The distant hum of traffic faded, and even the wind seemed to pause between the trees. I turned slowly and looked at her, unsure whether to laugh it off or argue. Instead, the question slipped out of my mouth before I even realized I was saying it. I looked straight at her and quietly asked if she did. Before we go any further, if you believe that kindness still matters in this world and that sometimes the heart deserves a second chance, take a moment right now to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in love, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the most important moments in life begin with a single honest sentence. My name is Michael Carter, and at the time this happened, I was 36 years old and working as a mechanic at a small repair shop on the outskirts of Cedar Rapids. Life had never been particularly glamorous for me. My days were spent under car hoods, and my evenings were quiet, usually filled with frozen dinners and reruns of old shows. But for the past year, my routine had been revolving around one person, a woman named Rebecca. Rebecca lived 2 streets away, and she had walked into the repair shop one rainy afternoon with a broken radiator and a smile that seemed to brighten the gray sky outside. She was confident, charming, and full of energy. She talked about big dreams, new cities, and a future that sounded far more exciting than the life I had always known. I was drawn to her immediately, the way people sometimes feel drawn toward light in a dark room. Over time, I started doing little things for her, fixing her car without charging full price, picking up groceries when she said she was too busy, helping her move furniture, paying for dinners, even lending her money when she claimed she'd pay it back once things settled down. I told myself that love was about patience and sacrifice, that one day she would see how much I cared, but deep down, there were moments when I wondered. Rebecca rarely asked about my life. She didn't notice the long hours I worked to make sure I could help her when she needed something. When she hugged me, it always felt quick and distracted, like she was already thinking about something else. Still, I kept hoping. And every evening, when I came home tired and uncertain, there was one constant in my life, my neighbor across the fence. Her name was Sarah Whitaker. Sarah was different from Rebecca in every possible way. She worked as a nurse at a nearby clinic, often coming home late with exhaustion written across her face. Her house was small, simple, and always smelled faintly of coffee and cinnamon candles. She had a quiet kindness about her, the kind that showed itself in small gestures. When my trash cans blew over during a storm, she picked them up. When my car battery died one winter morning, she brought jumper cables before I even asked. And when I came home late at night looking defeated after another argument with Rebecca, Sarah was usually on her porch with a warm cup of tea and a gentle smile. I had never thought too deeply about it. I just assumed she was a good neighbor. But that evening, when she said those words, when she told me that Rebecca didn't love me, the world shifted in a way I hadn't expected. After I asked her if she did, Sarah didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at the wooden boards of her porch, as if weighing whether honesty was worth the risk. Then she nodded, not dramatically, not with excitement, just a small, quiet nod that carried more truth than any speech ever could. And suddenly, everything began to make sense. I remembered the way Sarah had quietly left homemade soup on my porch the week I caught the flu. I remembered how she listened patiently when I talked about my problems, never interrupting, never judging. I remembered the way her eyes softened whenever she saw me walking home after a long day at work. All those moments I had dismissed as simple kindness were actually something deeper. Meanwhile, the woman I had been chasing for a year barely noticed when I was hurting. The realization was painful, but strangely freeing. That night, instead of delivering the groceries to Rebecca, I walked back inside my house and sat at the kitchen table for a long time. I thought about the money I had lent, the time I had spent trying to prove my worth, and the quiet neighbor who had cared without asking for anything in return. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to admit the truth. I had been chasing someone who only needed me when it was convenient, and I had been ignoring someone who had been there all along. The next morning I called Rebecca and told her that I needed to step back. She sounded surprised, almost annoyed, but not heartbroken. In fact, she moved on from the conversation faster than I expected, as if our relationship had been a temporary arrangement rather than something meaningful. That moment hurt more than I thought it would, but it also confirmed what Sarah had tried to tell me. Over the next few weeks, life slowly changed in ways I never expected. I began spending more time on my porch in the evenings, talking with Sarah across the fence. Sometimes we shared stories about our childhoods. Sometimes we simply watched the sunset in comfortable silence. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Sarah didn't care about grand gestures or expensive dinners. She cared about honesty, about laughter, about the small, everyday moments that make life meaningful, and little by little, something beautiful began to grow between us. Before the story reaches its ending, I want to ask you something special. Please take a moment and comment the word hope. It helps more people discover stories like this, and it reminds us that even after heartbreak, life can still surprise us. Months passed, and winter eventually gave way to spring. The trees in our neighborhood bloomed again, and the air carried that fresh promise of new beginnings. One evening, as the sky turned pink and gold above the rooftops, Sarah and I sat on the porch steps together. We talked about the strange way life sometimes leads us down the wrong path before showing us the right one. I looked at her then, really looked at her, and realized something that felt both simple and profound. Love had been living next door all along. Not loud, not dramatic, just patient, just real. Today, 2 years later, Sarah and I are still living in that same quiet neighborhood outside Cedar Rapids. The fence between our yards is still there, but it no longer separates us the way it once did. Sometimes we laugh about the night she told me the truth I didn't want to hear. And sometimes I think about how different my life would be if she had stayed silent. So if this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video, leave a comment about what part moved you the most, share it with someone who needs a reminder that real love still exists, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us of the quiet miracles happening every day. Because sometimes the person who truly cares about you isn't the one you're chasing. Sometimes they're simply the one brave enough to tell you the truth.